the least important case in her caseload, it still gets the same time and attention and care. The victims and witnesses still feel valued from it, regardless of what she has going on. And I think that's something I would really like to see in a judge.
Well, when you said the word compassion, I've often said it here, I won't vote for anyone if they don't have compassion. That's essential for any judge to have. So thank you. I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. How are we coming along with Judge Mulqueen?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes. At this time, we'll hear testimony from the Honorable Jane E. Mulqueen via Zoom.
All right. Thank you, Madam Counselor. Good morning, distinguished counselors. I'm honored to be here speaking on behalf of Attorney Simonian, and I do want to thank the counselors first for your support 4 years ago when I was going through this process for the Superior Court. Secondly, I do want to thank you all for your dedicated service to the people of the Commonwealth. And finally, for this opportunity to speak here today, I will be very brief. I unequivocally support the nomination of Attorney Simonian to the District Court. I have had the opportunity and indeed the pleasure to interact and work with Attorney Simonian in several capacities throughout the years. I watched her grow from a new Assistant District Attorney in the Northwestern District many years ago, where I briefly supervised her as she did child abuse cases in my unit. I watched her grow to a Superior Court prosecutor handling very serious felony crimes against persons in Hampden County, first as a colleague in the office of the Hampden County District Attorney, and then as a judge sitting mostly in Hampden County. And I've had the opportunity to watch Attorney Simonian in front of me on several trials in recent months and years. Attorney Simonian demonstrates sensitivity, she demonstrates good judgment, she demonstrates objectivity, and she demonstrates compassion, all characteristics that I think are absolutely necessary in a judge. She possesses all of these. She's handled a very serious caseload, very heavy caseload of very serious cases in a professional manner. In trial, she is always very prepared. She possesses, as I said, good judgment and the ability to think on her feet. And I think that too is very, very important. I think her background in social work, coupled with the legal experience that she has accumulated over the years, will serve her well in a position as a district court judge, a position that demands a balanced and fair assessment of multiple human situations. In my view, she possesses all of the qualities inherent in a good judge. As I said, I unequivocally support her nomination to the district court bench, and I would urge the counselors to confirm her nomination. If there are any questions, I would be happy to take those at this time.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
No. All right, thank you very much. Go back to doing what you do well as judge on, I believe it's a first-degree murder case.
It is. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, and last but certainly not least, Attorney Joe A. Smith III. Attorney Smith.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and happy birthday to you. I hope I will make it to where you obviously sit at this time in age. I, like the two witnesses before me, would urge all of you to confirm my friend, my opponent, my coworker, Janine Simonian, to the district court bench. I met Janine probably around the time that Atty Bennett met her, but in a different capacity. I am one of 3 African-American attorneys that practice in the western part of the state in the Superior Court. It can be lonely, but there are times where you meet people that try to bridge the gap, the cultural gap. Our backgrounds are completely different. I'm from the urban South, Nashville to be specific. She's from upstate New York. But we found a way to find common ground. And in this adversarial relationship that we have, and most people that know me know I am one of the most adversarial on my side of the bar when I need to be to protect the interests of my clients. You have to find some common ground. Janine has made it a point to understand the plight of the majority of the defendants that she is prosecuting. The majority of these people are Black and brown people, people from low income backgrounds, people that grew up like I did, people that did not grow up like her. And she's made it a point to understand their plight and mitigating factors. Now, I think what's also ironic is that the majority of the victims that she represents, or that the Commonwealth represents their interests, are also from the same background. And I've seen the way she interacted with these people. And as other people have said, these are people that have been discarded by society, systematic racism, unequal access to justice, both as victims and as defendants. And she's made a concerted effort both hear these victims out and to screen out cases and not to put people before the bar of justice where the case appears to be contrived. Not all prosecutors do that. All prosecutors do that. Some people, it's about winning and losing. Some people, it's not about justice. It's about what can I do to further my career? Or what can I do to feed my ego? The woman that's before you comes to the court every day without ego. And I, like Atty Bennett, I don't make it a practice to come up here and testify on behalf of people, and most certainly not people from the district attorney's office. They're represented well enough. They've got all the power behind them. But this woman here, I felt compelled. I'm gonna hopefully compel each and every one of you to confirm her, because she deserves it. She deserves it because I feel that she'll be equal to all parties, not just one. That's a concern that many of us have when we get career prosecutors or career defense attorneys. You know, sometimes we feel safer with the civil guys. I would urge all of you to confirm her. I'd be willing to take any questions if anyone has any.
Counselor Duenville?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your remarks. She's been a long-time DA. What's to say she's not going to be a DA on the bench?
Well, I wouldn't be here if I thought that. I most certainly would not be here if I thought that.
How many times we have heard that said about DAs? Half of them, or maybe a third of them, when I go to courthouses, they don't say good things. So how am I going to be assured of this lady?
I can tell you is my experience. My experience is that she's been fair.
Yeah.
She's been fair with oversight, where she doesn't have full discretion. I've seen her go back to her supervisors and ask for compassion in cases where she felt compassion was warranted. That, to me, is not consistent with the behavior of a person that would be able to detach themselves from their old position as a entity of the government to a neutral arbitrator of the law.
That road can change people.
I think they call it robitis. My wife just went through this process in Connecticut.
Let me ask you, you ever do a jury waived trial in the district court up in the Western Mass?
I have done many.
And how do you decide whether or not you're gonna do a jury rape trial?
The facts of the case. Generally, when I do jury waive trials, there are usually two things that I look at. For instance, if it's a sex-related case, and I think it would be difficult for people to remove emotion, and it's a technical case, I would leave it to the experts of the law.
Who do they-
Well, I would leave it to the judges who are more of understanding and should be theoretically more detached from.
So you wouldn't take into your consideration jury waiving, you don't take into consideration the judge sitting on the bench?
Of course we do. Of course we do.
You agree with me, there are judges that never say not guilty?
I haven't, that I don't know.
Let me ask you this, there are judges in Western Mass, I'm sure, I'm not gonna mention their names, that you would never jury waive in front of, am I right?
I don't practice in every court in Western Mass.
Oh, come on, you know what I'm getting at. Of course you don't do it in front of a judge who's got a reputation of never saying not guilty. You'd be committing malpractice.
Well, the majority of my trials have been with jury, and there are very rare circumstances where I would go jury waived anyway.
The district court?
The majority of my practice is in the Superior Court. But there are times where I think, OUI drugs, for instance. I don't know what that should have.
It's this. If you agree with me or not, there were judges sitting in this Commonwealth, practiced in Western Mass a lot, and there were judges there who I would never jury waive and go before the judge without a jury. There were others who I would jury waive in a minute. You have that same opinion? It's a hard question.
Yeah, I mean, see, this is why I disagree. On OUI drugs case, I would go before any judge of the Commonwealth. So I think it's particularized to the fact. On OUI drugs, that's a very technical area of the law. It's very difficult to prove.
There are judges in Western Mass who you would not jury waive in front of. You know it, and I know it. I could mention their names right now, but I'm not gonna. Am I right or wrong?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
But
Jeez.
I will say this. You're absolutely right, but
So my
Janine Simonian doesn't share any of those traits.
My question to you is this. What's she gonna be like as a jury waive judge?
That I can't speak. That I can't speak to.
Why are you here helping us?
What I do believe is what I've seen. I believe she would be impartial. I believe she would be fair. Me, myself personally, I would go jury waived in front of
I
her.
would too if I spoke for her at the governor's council.
But I have no doubts about her ability to serve. I have no doubts about her knowledge of the law. I have no doubts about her understanding the plight of attorneys and the need for continuances.
I have confidence in lawyers in Western Mass, if he's confirmed, jury waiving in front of her to be a fair judge.
Yes, I would.
Counselor Anella.
I just have to follow up with Counselor Giuliano. I've been an attorney for a number of years. I don't know an attorney. I don't know any practiced in downtown Boston who doesn't say to themselves, well, I got a case in front of so-and-so. Well, good. Jury waived. I think if they don't do that, it is malpractice. Let me just finish. I think it's malpractice. I think every single person, whether it's a motion, judge, never allowed a motion. I think every single attorney makes the decision, file a motion today, who's sitting in this section next month? All about the judge. As much as we all think we're great attorneys, to me, it's about the judge. Because this judge could say not guilty, the same facts, this judge is saying guilty. This judge could allow the motion, this judge could deny the motion. To me, it is all about the judge. So.
Yes, 100%. And I can tell you, if I thought that I mean, Simonian would be one of these judges that we have to scroll through the judge's calendar or the schedule and see who's sitting here. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't do that to the defense bar. I wouldn't do that to myself. Again, I'm here for two reasons. One, because of my experience with her, and two, because I love my people. And by my people, I mean the majority of the defendants that come before the court, which look like me, which have had similar backgrounds as me. And these are the people that you guys are talking about most of the time. So to me, I think it's have more invested than most. And I've been an outspoken advocate and critic of justice, particularly in Western Massachusetts. I think that the fact that I'm here, and again, you guys don't know me, but the fact I'm here, and I think the Honorable Hurley and those of us from Western Mass could attest to that. I'm not quiet. I'm not a person that's gonna just sit and rubber stamp someone. I have no desire to ascend to any other position than where I am. I just want equal justice for my people, and I want to give my opinion, a person that I've worked with for a decade. It hasn't always turned out good for me or her, but I've never walked away and felt like discovery was not provided. False information about witnesses was provided. Anything was hidden.
But I'm one of those people on the council who believe, not 100% of the time, more often than not, once a prosecutor, always the prosecutor. Stories all the time, but in this council a few years. Judge so-and-so, they don't know how to say the two words, not guilty. Sure, you've heard of these type of judges. We hear about these judges all the time. They don't know how to say not guilty. And I want people to be treated fairly, with respect. I want the judges to show decency, but if the facts warrant, I want the judge to be able to say not guilty. And to me, over my years, there's just been too many stories that I hear. Oh, I'm going in front of so-and-so. Oh, I gotta continue this case. No chance. I have no idea. I don't know this person. But we hear about it all the time. Oh, why do we appoint so-and-so? Oh, so that's what, is she gonna be able to say the words not guilty if the facts warrant? That's my only question.
I have no doubt.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Someone else? Councilor Paulo.
Two questions. Thank you for being here this morning.
Sir.
You've alluded several times to racial justice, and you've spoken of your work in Western Mass, which I'm not practicing in. What do you see as the greatest barriers to improving or achieving racial justice in the world you practice in?
Well, people that, number one, seek to understand the differences in people. And I know where you're going. There's no African, there aren't many African-American judges out there, or Hispanic, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Janine Simonian.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. So one barrier you see is the lack of diversity on the bench.
Absolutely.
And what about because I also heard you refer to what I would characterize as overzealous prosecution by individual prosecutors or a prosecutor.
I think that happens everywhere.
Could get in the way? Would
Absolutely.
that be fair? And I don't mean district attorneys or offices as a policy, but individual.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what, is there prescription for improvement that you're hinting at?
No, because I think they're overzealous defense attorneys that break the law and that tamper with witnesses. I just think it's the nature of the practice.
And I have one other.
Most of us are highly competitive people.
Sure.
Trial attorney speaking.
That's why you got in there, right? So, and then my other question is, you've spoken of the empathy that the nominee has.
Right.
And also, she comes with a social work background. Do you think that's an important background in our criminal justice system?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because I think a person that's dedicated a career or an area of study in social work, to me at least naturally, is seeking to, has a background in, I would say social work in itself is rehabilitative. We're seeking to rehabilitate people for the betterment of society. We all know what the purpose of the criminal justice system is: punitive and to rehabilitate. And there has to be a balance. And I think people with that sort of background that have an understanding of rehabilitating, when we talk about the district court, we're not talking about the most serious.
Right. So I'm not practicing in Western Mass. Are mental health and substance abuse disorder a primary concern that you see going through the courts there?
Well, what I can tell you is the last person I came here for
Yeah.
is Judge Charles Gross, who is the first justice of the Westfield District Court and is over the drug program. There's also, there's a drug court and a mental health court in the EACH program, which I believe is for youthful offenders between the ages of 18 and maybe 25. I can say the courts in most recent years are making positive strides in the Western Massachusetts part of the state, or in the western part of the state.
To me, that social work background, I don't know that it can be substituted. I think that it's vital to what we're seeing, especially in the district court, but really throughout our criminal justice system, the ability to, on one's feet, kind of diagnosis is the wrong term of art here, diagnose what's going on and tailor, whether it's sentencing, whatever the decision or disposition is, tailoring it to the actual situation. I'm not sure that one can achieve that without years working with that mindset and with that knowledge. Do you think that's fair to say in your?
Absolutely, because I think especially in the district court, the majority of the cases that we see, I'm not gonna say the majority, but a great deal of the cases that we see are fueled by either drug dependency or mental health issues.
Probably
Sometimes both.
undiagnosed mental health, right?
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your feedback on those issues. Thank you.
And for the record,
Yeah.
I believe ADA Simonian or Attorney Simonian understands that as well, because we've had cases that have involved mental health issues as well as drug dependency. And she's asked me in some of these cases, can you get me a diagnosis? Can you get me, would this person be willing to do drug treatment?
Right. And there's so many people with that expertise that I find it hard to imagine putting someone in a criminal system that doesn't have that. So I appreciate your responses.
Attorney Smith, did you apply for a judgeship?
Absolutely not. My wife is a judge in Connecticut.
There are other attorneys who are black or brown that you know of that would apply for a judgeship or stay where they are?
I have a couple of names that I think would be great. You like me to say them?
We'll talk after.
Okay.
Okay. You did just get.
Eddie Freeman. We've made strides recently
Western Mass.
in Western Mass. We have. And I'm proud of that. And I'm happy about that. But there's more to be done.
Okay.
Before we go there,
Especially in Central Mass.
I want to focus on ADA Simonian and getting an ally or a person that seeks to understand the plight of the majority of the people that come before the court. Thank you.
That's a tough one for you to
All
do.
right. So at this point, is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in favor of the nominee? Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak against the nomination? Hearing none, I will close that portion of the hearing. And at this time, I would invite Attorney Simonian to make your presentation. But before that, if you would like, you can introduce other folks that are here.
Sure, thank you. First, I'd like to introduce my parents, Bonnie and Dave Simonian, who traveled here from New York to be with us today. My wife, Terry Marconi, You met Max Bennett, you met Joe Smith, Melissa Doran, who is the first assistant clerk of the Hampshire Superior Court, also my best friend, and Beth Ann Steiner now, sorry, I knew her as Stanger, who I had to get a little cheat sheet. She's had a lot of different jobs in this building, but right now is the Public Affairs Director for the Mass Cultural Council, and a dear friend for the past 20 years. So I thank all of you for being here with me today. I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude and my heartfelt thanks to everyone who has assisted me in getting here today. First, I'd like to thank Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito for nominating me. I'd like to thank the Joint Bar Committee, Chief Trial Counsel Bob Ross. I'd like to thank the members of the Judicial Nominating Commission, including Executive Director Lauren Green-Trigno, Emily Gauthier, and Katie Babin for all of your advice and support. I'd also like to thank Valerie McCarthy and all of her staff, and each member of the Governor's Council for all of your hard work and dedication in affording me this opportunity today. It's kind of already been announced. My thunder's been a little stolen, but I would just like to thank, I would like to say happy anniversary to Councilor Kennedy. I believe it was 37 years today. And also I'd like to wish my counselor, Mary Hurley, a very happy birthday. And I would just also like to thank you for all of your support and guidance through this process.
That's how he remembers his anniversary.
He says it's your birthday. Whatever works, right? I'd also like to thank my amazing family, my parents, Bonnie and Dave, and my wife, Terry, who are with me today. I'd like to acknowledge my brother, David, and my stepchildren, Julian and Ella, who are unable to join us today, but I know are here in spirit. I would not be here where I am in life or in my career without the love and support of all of you. And I'd like to thank all of my friends and colleagues who are here supporting me today, and all the ones who have sent well wishes via text this morning and yesterday. You've made me a better lawyer, I'm not gonna cry, a better colleague, and a better human being. I was raised in upstate New York by two incredible parents who taught me two important things. First, a job worth doing is worth doing well, and second, to think before you speak. This advice has always served me well as an attorney and in life in general. My parents always led by example by showing my brother and I how important it is to always work hard and to value your friends and your family. My father is the son of an Armenian immigrant. At 20 years old, he was drafted to serve in the Army. But prior to traveling overseas, he went to Officers Candidate School, rising through the ranks to become a lieutenant. He spent a year in combat in Vietnam and was awarded both the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. After returning to the States, he worked full-time and went to college full-time. And after many years of hard work, he retired as the CFO of Simmons Machine Tool Corps, which is a railroad manufacturing firm in New York. My mother is the daughter of a Czechoslovakian immigrant. She worked for the New York State Police as a civilian for 43 years until I finally helped convince her to retire. Somehow, despite working full-time as well, she always managed to get myself and my brother to all of our sporting events, school events, and extracurricular activities, and I'm not quite sure how she did it. After her retirement, it was not long before she ended up back at the state police 2 days a week because she just couldn't keep herself away. She jokes that it's to pay for my father's greens fees, but whatever the reason, either way, they encouraged me to always work hard and to always give it my best and to give back to my community. And I truly believe that these values are what led me to public service, which is where I spent most of my career. A friend's mom once remarked that I was the only friend of her daughter's that became what I said I was going to do in second grade. I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I can't tell you why. I just always knew. And as I grew older, I remember telling people that I was going to be on the Supreme Court. I guess not, I didn't really know what that meant. I suppose I understood that being a judge was a great aspiration, and the Supreme Court was the only court that I'd ever heard of. Once I actually became a practicing attorney, I immediately realized that here in Massachusetts, the best place to be is a judge in the district court. District court is the court of the people. It is the court of second chances. It is the place where you can truly make a difference in someone's life. State prison is never an option. There are mental health courts, there are drug courts, and there are veterans courts that exist for treatment and rehabilitation. In civil practice, litigants can actually represent themselves. I believe that my background in social work and the law make me a unique candidate for this district court judgeship. So how did I end up here? I graduated from high school in Guilderland, New York, and it was during that time that I was chosen as a natural helper. This is a peer assistance program that provides training to students who are identified by both peers and school faculty members, school staff, as people who are considered to be good listeners. We were trained by social workers about helping, listening, and better communication skills so we could try and connect students who are struggling with the appropriate resources. And it was at this time is when I fell in love with the profession of social work. I decided to head to college to obtain a bachelor's in social work before starting law school. I attended Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, which was an all-women's college at the time. I completed a field placement at the Department of Social Services, working to provide case management to individuals with HIV and AIDS. And when it came time to search for law schools, as my college career was winding down, I learned that you could obtain a dual degree in social work and the law, and I was ecstatic. So I was accepted into the master's program at the University of Connecticut, where I majored in policy and planning. And in addition to my coursework, I was able to work for a lobbyist and also to travel to Armenia, where my father's father emigrated from, to help continue the development of the profession of social work. I ultimately ended up obtaining the 2 degrees separately, and my law school degree led me to the New England School of Law here in Boston. During my first year, I was introduced to former Representative John Slattery and his family, and offered a job as a law clerk in the law office of Ronald A. Wysocki in Boston. I learned so much in those early years about civil practice, criminal practice, BBO complaints, tax abatement procedures, but most importantly, how a small general practice law firm operates. When I graduated from law school, I was hired by Geary and Associates, which is a small general practice in Kingston, where I was an associate attorney, again, assisting with civil, criminal, juvenile, probate, and business law matters, as well as real estate. It wasn't long before I realized that of all the things that I was doing, that criminal law was my favorite. And one day, when I was perusing Mass Lawyers Weekly, I saw a position for an assistant district attorney position in the Northwestern District Attorney's Office. Having always loved Northampton, I decided to apply, and within a month, I was a new ADA prosecuting cases in Northampton and what used to be Hadley, it's now Belchertown. And then eventually I moved up to Franklin County and practiced in both Greenfield and Orange District Courts. I was named the domestic violence prosecutor and also promoted to attorney in charge of Orange District Court. I also prosecuted elder abuse, domestic violence, and adult sexual assault cases there in Superior Court. In 2013, then DA Mark Mastriani, now federal judge Mastriani, offered me a full-time position in Superior Court in his grand jury unit. And it was the perfect introduction to the elements of the crimes prosecuted in the very busy Hampden Superior Court. When District Attorney Gallooni took the helm, he moved me into the violent crimes unit. I think it was called Crimes Against the Person and Property back then. It's had several different names, but basically prosecuting major felonies and violent crimes. I now prosecute cases in the domestic violence and the adult sexual assault unit. I've truly loved every minute of my career, even during the tough times. The past 19 years has taught me so much. I am honored and humbled to be considered for a position of a district court judgeship. And I believe that serving as a judge would allow me to continue to serve my community while combining both my love and passion for social work as well as my love of the law. I began my legal career with a commitment to the core values of social work, such as the belief that everyone has inherent self-worth and dignity and is capable of change. I feel that these values have served me well as a litigator, and the experience and knowledge that I have gained would assist me in continuing to make a difference in my community and maybe help people make some better choices. I thank you for your consideration here today, and I welcome any questions that you.
All right, thank you very much. Before we get to questions, I would note that it's about 7 minutes of 12. We are going to be in recess somewhere around 12:15 for what we call our assembly. We have that in the presence of the Lieutenant Governor. I invite you all to stay in place, because as soon as that is over with, we'll continue with this hearing. Okay? So, under the procedures, Counselor Ferrari, you're first.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Did you ever get the pleasure to try cases before Judge Hurley?
I did not. She had retired before. Well, no, that's not true. I was before her one time on a continuance in the gun court, but just very briefly.
Right over your resume and all the cases you've been involved in. One jumped out at me, the one where, like 100 animals were abused and malnourished and everything. And I was kind of surprised that the guy didn't do any time. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I did ask for time, actually for the female, for the male, it was just straight probation. But I mean, I guess what value would sending them to jail really serve? I guess punishment certainly, but I believe, my understanding is that they were placed on probation for a long period of time where we made sure that someone from, animal prevention for cruelty to animals was still checking in with them on a regular basis. So at the end of the day, we were trying to keep them from hurting any more animals, and I think the sentence probably ended up doing that.
Then one of your cases was supposed to be tried starting April 22nd of this year. Did that get tried? Did you try that?
Being a resolution to, we agreed to a guilty on second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 30 years to life. And the fact that he was a mid-40-year-old gentleman with some significant health problems, in essence, it probably, even though it wasn't a life sentence, that it will be a sentence for the rest of his life. And the victim's daughter, which was really the most important person, supported it.
Well, somebody who spent 30 years in law enforcement, I appreciate your service to the Commonwealth.
Yep.
I think your resume is very deep and very, very heavy as opposed to some others. I like your social work. I like the fact that you went to Armenia and you've helped the narrow people and things you've done. I'm going to bring all your life experience to be a good judge in the court. You have a big fan here to my left. And I put a lot of weight into what Judge Hurley tells me to do because she knows the people out west. So you have my support. That's sweet. Good luck.
Thanks so much.
All right. Council Jim,
Thank you, Counselor Hurley. I have to go over your application because I have a pet peeve about nominees and what they say. And I've counted about 20 times you've put the answer to your question as not applicable. So,
I really think that's in the instructions, which is why I did that. Okay. It's the only reason why. It said list not applicable.
but I want to go through them with you. Okay. Have you ever been engaged in an occupation other than the practice of law, blah, blah, blah? Not applicable. You've never been involved with any other area except a lawyer?
The social work during my training, I mean, but really it's just been the law.
Okay. You list employment history. It asks you in the last category if you've ever been discharged from employment or resigned after being informed that your employee intended to discharge you. Ronnie Wysocki, you put not applicable. Why shouldn't that be no or yes?
It is no, but again, I think I was just trying to follow the instructions on the application, which said put
The
not.
instructions didn't say to not answer the question, did it?
It said to put if it didn't apply, not applicable.
If there's a what?
If it said if it didn't apply, to put not applicable, I think.
Okay, but F here applies. The answer is yes or no, right? There's another couple of things the same way, but I do this to everybody that does this. State approximately how many arbitrations or administrative hearings you've had or tried. It's a lot less writing to put no, isn't it? Have you ever been a master or arbitrator? We agree that's applicable one way or the other. Have you ever served on any bar association referral panel? Do you currently belong or have you ever belonged to any organization that discriminates on the basis of race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, national origin, or religion? You put not applicable. Why wouldn't that be applicable? Wouldn't you think we'd want to know that?
In my thought, the answer is no.
I mean, under your scenario, every candidate should just put not applicable to everything. Nobody can ask you any questions about it. Have you ever been involved in any legal proceedings other than as counsel? the best of your knowledge, has there been any complaint made against you to the Board of our overseers? And not applicable is not the right answer for that. Would you agree?
I agree.
And you've got a whole bunch of other ones. 20 or 21. So one thing is, you're going to be a judge. You got to be able to read well and answer the questions. I mean, if you're going to say on the bench, not applicable to lawyers that ask you questions, you're not going to make a good judge. So you've had jury waive trials, haven't you, in district court?
I have.
And do you agree with me that judges are different in jury waive trials?
Are they different? Do they act?
Judges different some way, right?
Yes.
And some judges don't really say no, not guilty very much. Some.
I can think of some, yes.
I can think of some too. So the question is, how do I know you're going to be a judge that's different than that? Because I think it's a very sad commentary on a judge that nobody will jury waive in front of because they don't believe that judge is going to be fair. And to me, I don't think there's anything worse than that, having a career like that, and you leave, people say, hey, wasn't a fair judge.
I don't want to be that kind of judge. I don't want to be referred to as that kind of judge, and I don't want that reputation. And I think that what I can tell you is that I am fair. I will listen to both sides. And honestly, sometimes the Commonwealth has a better argument and sometimes the defendant has the better argument. And I am not afraid to say not guilty. So I hear everyone's concerns that I'm a prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor most of my career. I did start in private practice, so I have a little bit of criminal defense experience. But I want to listen to the facts. I want to hear what's put before me. And like I said, sometimes this side has a better argument, sometimes this does. But I don't think that I am not going to be the kind of judge that constantly says guilty.
Well, there's also, aside from an argument, maybe a lawyer doesn't make an opening in a jury waive. Maybe he doesn't even make a closing. You still got to decide the case on the evidence you hear, right?
Sometimes the evidence is there for the Commonwealth and sometimes it's not. It's not.
Okay. I think there's two kinds of judges in that scenario. Judges that look for reasonable doubt in a case and find it. And there are judges who look not for reasonable doubt, look for any way they can to substantiate a guilty. Which one are you going to be?
I will be somewhere in the middle.
So I couldn't hear you.
I'm going to be somewhere in the middle because you have to look at each case on a case-by-case basis.
Isn't the law that the Commonwealth has got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt?
Correct?
So why wouldn't you as a judge look for a reasonable doubt in a case?
I wouldn't look for reasonable doubt. I would want to hear the facts. I hopefully know the law at this point, and if not, I will learn the law. And then based upon the law and the facts, make a determination. Every case is different.
Well, the burden's on them.
Absolutely, of course. And if the Commonwealth doesn't meet its burden, then
So if you're going to sit there and say, I'm not going to look for reasonable doubt, then there's only going to be one answer, guilty.
I can't say that. It depends on each case and the facts.
Wouldn't you look for evidence in the case that gives a reasonable doubt?
I'm looking to see if the Commonwealth has proven the elements of the crime. And if they have successfully done that, then I would find the person guilty. If they have not met the elements of the crime, then I would find that person not guilty.
And it wouldn't have anything to do with reasonable doubt?
Well, of course it has to do with reasonable doubt. That's the burden that I'm evaluating the evidence on and the facts on, but I think it really depends on each case.
Well, I think for each case, the reasonable doubt standard is the same.
Of course.
So as a judge sits there and he listens to evidence and he hears or she hears things that in her mind say, I have some some concern about that testimony. I have a doubt about it.
That would equate to a not guilty. If the elements are not proven beyond a reasonable doubt and there's doubt, then that would be a not guilty.
And how long ago was that trial in Greenfield?
2006 or 7? I think it was 2006, right when I started.
Watch it.
I watched a good portion of the day. I think I left, there was some trouble with playing his statement. And I at that point, but I watched a good portion of the day
Were you at the table with
in the back,
your sick?
just observing,
Yeah.
observing.
Well, I think you're going to be a breath of fresh air in the court system. You got some good people backing you. A.J. O'Donnell, Joe Franco called me. And Judge Mulcahy, who I believe is, if you follow what he does, you'll make a wonderful judge. The Judge Hurley also is pretty big in your corner, so.
Thank you very much. I would point out that Lieutenant Governor is coming in somewhere around 12:15, so you have 10 minutes, and then you'll have an additional 5 minutes afterwards.
Nice to see you
Nice to
again.
see you again.
For all the time that we spent over the Belgian waffles, we discussed all of the non-applicables, yes or no, so I'm not gonna go over that. I described that to you, that it wasn't appropriate, and you explained why you did it that way. And it's not the first one that did it, but you had a lot. But anyway, putting that aside, I was very impressed with your background, and especially going back to social work. And why don't you tell us about your social work and how that makes you more qualified to be a judge?
I think the background in social work is a unique perspective that I bring. Like, as I stated, the core values of social work is start where the client is at. Everyone has inherent self-worth and dignity and is capable of change. And that's kind of the mentality that I began my legal career with. And I think it has always served me well dealing with everyone, the parties that we work with, the defense attorneys, the court staff, victims, defendants, all the above. I think it just has allowed me to have a unique perspective and way of doing things. And I think people who don't have a master's in social work don't necessarily. So I think personally that these two careers actually combined really well, and would hopefully make me a great judge for the Commonwealth.
No, and what I saw in you is compassion, and I've said it over and over here, I will not vote for anyone if they don't have compassion. Now, some of your cases, I'll tell you, I don't know how you sleep at night, God bless you. But one of the things, I love animals. All my 4 children, they have rescue animals, dogs, we have cats. And it seems like more and more I see that there's more of these crazy people that have all of these cats and dogs, and they're dying and they're dead or whatever. And I never heard what punishment they get. And I finally saw it in your JNC. So tell us about that. 92 cats, 7 dogs, skunks, raccoons, and animals. It's just egregious.
It was awful. I remember the police officers who came in to talk about the case before we indicted it said the stench was so bad that their eyes were just burning when they walked into that house. And it was hard. I mean, honestly, the defendant, from what I'm told, I mean, she cared for animals and she thought she was doing a good thing by taking these animals in, and it overwhelmed her. It got too much, and they were just in terrible states by the time the animal control got in there. But you know what? She was put on probation for a long period of time. There's counseling going on. There's people checking in on her. And from what there's been no violation of probation, so it seems to have done the job. So.
And so the sentence was 1 year in jail.
She ended up with probation.
Yeah.
She got.
Not enough for me, I'll tell you. Let me ask you, you had 3 really unbelievable cases that I think you'll stay with you for all your life. And one of them was 3 lifer.
Yes.
Tell us about that one.
So that Max Bennett was the chief trial counsel in that case, and I was second chair. And that case will stay with me forever. It was horrible, gruesome. He is serving 3 life sentences and, there were actual victims who came forward after the news broke who said, that happened to me too, but I survived. And so, we were able to keep them on board and have them come and give victim impact statements. And it was a beautiful yet terrible day when he was convicted of 3 life sentences consecutive.
And the other two were just terrific too. And you want to tell us about those?
So I believe one was the Adrian
Children.
Hines case, which that was a case that will always stay with me because I tried it not once but twice. From our perspective, it was an unprovoked hammer attack on 2 innocent victims. The appeal that was allowed was because the SJC said that one of the defendant's experts should have been allowed to testify. We had a second trial. He was convicted again. So, but it was a very grueling case. There's over 300 pleadings in the case. At least it was 6 years. It was 6 years of my life. Yes. And then I think was the last one, the Torres case up in Greenfield.
Was that the one where the woman was,
Sat behind
she was a victim, and it just says there's something wrong with women that, I don't know. Here she is a victim, and you can tell what happened to her, and then she supports the perpetrator.
But then when they said guilty, the look of relief on her face said it all. So, she couldn't find the voice to come testify, but at the end of the day, I think she was grateful.
Well, I've gone to different courts, drug courts and everything, but I've never heard of a mental health court. Where are they?
There's one in Springfield, and if I am appointed to Chicopee, I would like to see one go to Chicopee. But I think there's several different courts throughout the state that have that court.
That's so important, and I really admire you that that's something you want to institute in Chicopee. That's wonderful. Have you talked to anyone about that? How you're going to go about it?
Judge Mulcahy actually runs the one in Springfield District Court. He said it's his favorite part of the day, and he said he would absolutely help me and support me in that endeavor.
I think, and you have said that that's one of the biggest problems in the court when you were asked. So, I'm tagged, so this is awful, and we never have in any other councils, and it really, there's not federal, state, or local that ever times the people who are holding the hearing, but I am held to that. So that's why I feel like the Federal Express man here. But anyway, now, your writing sample, excellent. And it's so important to be able to write. And that was twice, I really did. So tell us about that. That went in all.
Yeah, so that was a case where the victim had been stabbed at a bar at a high school reunion, and the evidence, we had a very poor surveillance video and limited witnesses. And then the victim who testified at this press hearing subsequently passed away. And so when it came time to trial, I needed his testimony to be able to prove the case. And so we filed a motion in limine for former testimony to be allowed. It was denied. We appealed it all the way up to the SJC. They agreed with us. We had the trial. We read in the testimony, and unfortunately, it was a not guilty, but we tried. We tried our best. We tried our hardest, and sometimes that's how it goes.
Through the pandemic, I've had a lot of concerns. I have a lot of concerns about child abuse because we don't know what's happening at home. The babies can't talk, and if they could go to school, the children probably went 4 months out of the year, but the children would, the teacher would notice, or maybe they would talk to the teacher. The other thing is domestic. And the 209As are really concerning to me because in my investigation, some of the courts actually were interviewing the person on the phone. Now, how do you see their body language? You're not looking them in the eye and all of that. Tell me about how you proceeded with all of this.
So COVID was tough for all levels of the practice that we do, especially restraining orders, because obviously they're vitally important to protect people's safety, but the courts were closed. And so before I think Zoom kind of got up and running, that the phone calls were how the 209As were being, heard and granted. And unfortunately, we just kind of had to make shift and do the best we could during that time period. And It would be better to keep someone safe over the phone than to not have someone have an order.
The other thing is, I'm not very many people have publications, you do. Tell me about that, you pull up a comment for motor vehicles, Massachusetts motor vehicle offenses. Yeah, tell us about that.
So
We have more drunk drivers now, it's awful, yeah, people being killed.
when I was in the Northwestern District, my supervisor at the time was asked to edit that chapter and she asked me to do it with her. And then she retired, so then it kind of became my baby. And then head of the motor vehicle crimes unit in our office also co-authors it with me. So we go through the MCLE every, I think it's 2 or 4 years, review the law, add any updates that are in there, and then it's reviewed by judges and edited and printed. So, and the other one is I actually co-authored an article on social work about transitioning women in Armenia, based upon the work that I did when I was there.
And you got an award for your public service too? Yeah, well, it's in here, but anyway, I can't go through it because I've used it. But, no, I just was so impressed when I met you because you have seen it all and you work with police departments and that's very important in court personnel. So you've already done all of that. And how have you found the relationship with the police in your work?
I've always had wonderful relationships with the police officers that I work with from every department, Franklin, Hampshire, and Hampden County. Of course, we all know that there's certainly difficult officers, but as a general rule, wonderful. And it's always been a great rapport.
It's a tough time for the good police officers for the bad apples. I really feel bad for them because you can't put them all in one bag, and I respect what they do. I'm glad to hear that. So, so what do you feel there should be, you have worked at this and you have been in all aspects. What do you think needs to be changed in the court? What is better? I mean, you work with drug addicts, you work with mental health, all of that. What do you see that should be changed in the court that you're going to?
I think we just need more access to programs and treatment and that sort of thing for options for rehabilitation. No one thinks sending anyone to jail is a good thing. Sometimes you have to for punishment reasons, but as a general rule, district court, I think it's really rehabilitation based. So more access to programming and support services.
Well, you see it over and over, the same thing, they're talking about drug addiction, but we don't have drug treatment centers. I think we've got 3, one for women. And that's what bothers me, that the legislators don't come through with that. I think the judiciary gets 1.5% of the budget. So what can we do about that? Because how can we address this? I've had 2 friends that lost their sons overdose on, heroin, and they were good people. These aren't criminals. I don't know how they get involved in it, but what do you think? I mean, you're not a miracle worker, but we see that we can do
Anything
that we get more centers.
Anything that we can do to lobby more support for services.
And they have to be long-term. I mean, you have one to do a weekend, they're out the street again, So, I don't know, but I don't think they give harsh sentences for the drug dealers. We had one judge that let him go on probation because he didn't want him to be deported. And he was providing for his family, definitely providing for his family. And there was about 60 legislators that wrote letters and nothing was done. And he's still going. And I think of my 2 friends that lost their sons, if that was a drug dealer that gave the drugs to their boys, would they say, oh, he was providing for his family? So I'm going to get off my soapbox. But anyway, I thank you for all the time that you afforded me. And the long time you came, a couple of hours you came to drive to see me. But the Belgian waffle was great. And I've got to say this. There's got to be Simonians that you're related to in Watertown. They're friends of mine, and I know.
Sure.
That's the first thing I asked. But anyway, thank you so much, and I couldn't be more supportive. We need people with your experience, and some of the people that are coming through are learning on the job. We had someone that worked in a city hall, one of 13 solicitors, assistant solicitors, and this is not what I
Okay, welcome everyone. We have two celebratory events of note. One would be Mary Hurley's birthday. Happy birthday to you.
It comes once a year.
It does. It's an everyday your birthday, Councilor Hurley. And we have a very special wedding anniversary. June is a popular month, as I would know this as well as Terry Kennedy.
I usually spend it with my wife, but she sent me here.
So how many years?
37.
Okay, good.
37 minutes. Underwater.
Excuse me, Joe. It's also my son's birthday.
Oh, wonderful. Happy birthday to your son. And you can never acknowledge these important milestones in life enough. Life is challenging enough, so to all of you with milestones in your lives, enjoy those moments. I recognize Councilor DiPaolo for a motion to record advice and consent for the financial warrant.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I recognize Councilor Jubinville for a motion to record advice and consent for the pending list of notaries public and justices of the peace.
Make that motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And I recognize Councilor Ferreira for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Mary Ann Galvin as a member of the parole board to a term expiring on September 14, 2025.
I'm going to make that motion.
Second.
Area Galvin?
Yes, Councilor.
I'm not going to spend the time. There's no words. I've been here 23 years, and she's the most qualified that I have seen in my tenure. And I'm just so glad that she applied, and I'm so glad that the governor put her forward. A forensic specialist, we need it. We need it.
Thank you. We may begin the roll call.
Yes.
Yes. Kennedy?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilor Devaney.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Dozed off.
I recognize Councilor Duff for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Mark J. DeFrancisco as chairman of the Appellate Tax Board to a term expiring on February 28, 2026.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Councilor.
We are voting today on a nominee for parole board. State rep.
Voting on the appellate tax board.
Sorry.
Appellate tax board.
Oh, my God. Both of them, I could say right now, both of them so qualified and for reappointment. And I thank them for willing to serve again. And we're very lucky to have them. And I thank the governor for reappointing them.
Okay, so this motion is for Mark J. DeFrancisco. There's a motion and there's a second. Who made the second?
Second.
Okay. And we may begin the roll call.
Yes.
Kennedy?
Yes.
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 Thank you. I recognize Councilor Jubinville for a motion to record advice and consent for the reappointment of Patricia M. Good as a member of the Appellate Tax Board to a term expiring on February 28, 2027.
I make that motion.
Second.
Excellent.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We may begin the roll call.
Kennedy?
Yes.
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 With pleasure, yes.
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 Thank you. I recognize Councilor Duff for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of James M. Kelcourse as a member of the parole board to a term expiring on June 2, 2026.
Move, Governor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Councilor.
I'm sorry. We are voting today on a nominee for parole board, State Representative James Calcourse. This is the fastest track I have ever seen in my 23 years. The process was about a month. When first elected, I investigated the parole board and found it wasn't in compliance to state statute for 30 years. They were all prosecutors. I worked hard to change it. I have seen wonderful, qualified people thrown off, yes, thrown off, not reappointed on the parole board. Lee Gartenberg, known as the Massachusetts expert on parole matters, He has advised the parole board up to now for years. Lee filled a 4-month unexpired term and wasn't reappointed. Lucy Abbey Soto, outstanding, appointed by 2 previous governors for 5-year terms, was not reappointed. Lucy also is Hispanic. She speaks Spanish. How valuable on the parole board. Now I am being asked to vote for a state representative who has aspirations to be a judge, has run for other offices, like mayor, and unsuccessful, and is presently on the September ballot unopposed for re-election as state representative from Andover. When I asked the state representative, when I met with him, when he applied, and I asked at the hearing, and another colleague, Councilor DePaula, asked him too. When I asked him when he had his interview, he couldn't remember. I asked him when he applied, couldn't remember. I asked him when he filed his required signatures to be on the ballot in September for re-election. He couldn't remember. The filing date was May 3rd, but he couldn't remember. The letter to the council from the governor appointing the state representative was June 1st. This is the fastest track I've ever seen in 23 years. He also stated to me when I met him at his hearing, when he heard that there were 2 openings on the parole board, he called Councilors Kennedy and Jugenville. He said they encouraged him to apply. And when I met him, and also at the hearing, he stated that his father is a lifelong friend, childhood friend of the Speaker of the House. Representative Kalkours has run for mayor unsuccessfully and has acknowledged publicly at his hearing, when he was asked, that he was interested in being a judge. As a legislator, I looked at his record. He has never sponsored any legislation vaguely related to parole. He has not served on any committee, public safety, mental health, substance abuse, judiciary, none of it. He's never sponsored any legislation. I asked him if he ever went to a parole board hearing. He's never been interested in going to a parole board hearing. I go to parole board hearings. He wasn't even interested in coming to our historic commutations for 2 black men who got life sentences without parole. He wasn't even interested to go to their lifer hearings. You know, he's a good person. You'll like him. I would vote for him to be Mr. Congeniality of the legislators, and people like him. He gets along. He's a team player. I asked him what his qualifications were. I believe in second chances. There's no one in this room that doesn't believe in second chances. Would we all apply for parole board because we believe in second chances? I find no joy in voting no, but I know this is wrong. When I see the good people, qualified people that are thrown out, not reappointed, and we have someone who's looking for something to go somewhere else to be a judge or to be a mayor or whatever. But I'm saying this is wrong. And he will be elected. He's unopposed in September. So he still has his job. And in Andover, they're going to have to maybe have a special election in November. I don't know. That's their business. But all I know is that this is the fastest track, not even a month. And as I said, another counselor asked the same questions, and neither one of them got the answer. He can't remember a month. So with that, I regret to say, I'm very disappointed that the administration would put up someone like this. We have so many good people, and no one comes in this fast. Lucy, 18 months it took when they threw her off, when they didn't reappoint her. 18 months, and I asked you, every week, Lieutenant Governor, we have a reappointment on the parole board, and then all of a sudden, we got someone else, political, and that's it. And I will not vote for someone political. I vote for good people that are qualified. He's a good person. He's a good legislator. And they like him. He goes unopposed. And that's all I have to say. And I'm really heartbroken over this. Heartbroken.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I just say,
Councilor Jubenville.
I was fortunate enough to have a couple of interviews with Mr. Kalkours. And my problem with the parole board is that they seem to retry for second-degree lifers anyway, but for all of them, they seem to retry the case that was either pled to years ago or found guilty years ago. They have this, we got to retry that. We got to look into every fact. And we got to get the person to admit he did it or she did it. Otherwise, they're not getting paroled. And, you know, there are some people, it's about 10 to 15% they estimate that are sitting in our jails that are not guilty. And sometimes they don't admit it. Even when admitting it means they can walk out, they don't admit it because they didn't do it. So I went over that with this nominee very, very closely. And he committed to me twice in my office and once here that he would not engage in that. That he would start from the first day that inmate went into that prison and see how he did in prison. If he was a good inmate, then he's eligible for parole. The case is done and over with. That's why he's in jail. So to me, that's one of the most important things I heard from him. Now, we know that people come here and we know they're after a job. They're looking for a job. So they're going to tell us a lot of the things we like to hear. And we don't, even though we give an oath like this morning, we don't have any power over a person to charge him with a crime of perjury or her. We don't have that ability. The legislature hasn't given it to us. But we do have a weapon, and that weapon is to vote no. Somebody comes back here after they've told us something and they didn't do it. So as I understand it, he does not have a full term. He's taking somebody's place. So he will come back here one way or the other. And if he hasn't done what he said he's done, then he's going to have a problem with this council, I'm sure. I asked him in my office whether he applied for a judgeship. I asked him here. He said, no, I have not. So I take him at his word. I don't know the man other than my meetings with him. He has done defense work, and I consider that a profession where you have to have empathy and compassion for individuals to be able to get up and make arguments in a courtroom. So I like that about him. And if he says what he's going to do, I think he'd be a great addition to the parole board. So thank you.
Councilor DiPaolo.
Representative Kilcourse is a good man. We've certainly heard about that. He's well respected. He serves his constituents well. The reality is in our criminal justice system right now, we hear week after week at our council hearings that it's mental health and addiction services that are most important to address. The parole board not only evaluates incarcerated individuals' record while incarcerated, but also the likelihood of successful reentry, access to counseling services, rehabilitation services, et cetera. There are moments where single members of the parole board hold initial release hearings in our houses of parole. And I can't, unfortunately, vote for this nominee. I can't tell a family in the Commonwealth that their family member is having an initial hearing in front of someone who has no expertise in the very challenges that our criminal justice system faces. So although I do believe the nominee is a good person, a good representative, I take no joy, but I will be voting no on this nominee.
Councilor Hurley.
I had talked to Mr. Kilcourse on the phone, and we got off on the wrong foot, to say the least. And I think I did a pretty good job in my questions to him. But the real question that needs to be answered is whether or not I believe that he would ultimately do a good job as a member of the parole board. After the hearing, I discussed the matter with several people, including Counselor Duff, who knows him the best and who brought to my attention certain things. And I think the indication was after the hearing that I was going to vote no. However, I've reconsidered it. So I don't think you can normally judge a book by its cover. Not every person who's on the parole board has to be a social worker. If that were the case, I think it would swing the pendulum definitely in the wrong direction. What you need on the parole board, as in any other board, including this council, is balance. I can't think of any two people who are on this council who ever think exactly the same way or come from the same backgrounds. But the voters have entrusted us with the responsibility of making serious decisions about who would be best for judges, clerks, parole board members. And so every once in a while, I think I admitted to getting it wrong way back when. And I changed my mind and I voted for that person as well. So I intend to vote yes today.
Councilor Ferreira.
Thank you. Just a couple of words. I spoke with Mr. Kalkoris at length several times, and I think that I agree with Councilor Hurley that you don't need all forensic psychologists on the parole board, and that would be inappropriate in my mind. We appoint judges every week here, just about every week, and we look for people that know the difference between a good person having a bad day and a bad person that should be held because of public safety reasons. I think Jim Kalkoris brings to the parole board a whole diverse range of talent. As someone who has served the public, who's got reelected 5 times by all his constituents, by a wide margin. Someone who I got calls from police chiefs from Salisbury and other police chiefs saying he's a public safety oriented guy. He's brought money to his communities to deal with addiction and alcohol and drugs. But at the end of the day, I think Jim Kalkoris is also going to be the guy that holds people accountable and leave bad guys in jail. And as a former police chief, I'm okay with that. It's good to have empathy. It's good to have sympathy. It's good to give people second chances. But every single week, we decide whether these judges can tell the difference between a bad person and a good person who had a bad day. And I think Jim Kalkoris is that guy. Additionally, 2 points that I brought up last week are people are treated different in different house corrections. Whether you commit a crime in Bristol County, Worcester County, or Hampden County, you may not have access to the same programs. You may not have the same chance of rehabilitation. Jim Kalkoris, being a member of the legislature, knows how to work this building, and he could help with matters like that. Jim Kalkoris, as a state legislator, knows how to get funding for the parole board and make sure it's directed in the right areas. And that's why I'm voting for Jim Kalkoris today. Thank you.
Councilor Kennedy.
I just want to comment on Councilor Devaney's comment that Jim Kalkoris reached out to me and I encouraged him to apply. That's absolutely 100% true. He did reach out to me and I had a long conversation with him. And I thought he would be somebody who would be a great fit for the parole board after talking to him. He's somebody who seems to have a lot of empathy, who seems to be very excited by the prospect of being able to help people. Those were his words. I also want to point out that the first, Charlene Bonner reached out to me when she first got on the parole board, a forensic psychologist, and I encouraged her to apply. And Dr. Galvin, who we voted on today, a forensic psychologist, reached out to me about a year ago, and I encouraged her to apply. So it's not unusual to encourage people to apply for positions who reach out to us in our elected positions. And that was 2 forensic psychologists that I pushed very hard to apply. I also encourage Jim Kalkoris because I believe that he's going to be a dedicated member of the parole board. I think he's going to do the right thing, and I intend to vote yes.
Councilor Iannello.
I plan to vote no on the nomination of Jim Kalkoris. You know, to me, it's all about the folks, prisons. 80% of the people in prison have mental health issues or substance abuse issues. Jim Kalkoris, from all accounts, is a nice guy, but he has no experience when it comes to mental health issues or substance abuse issues. And to me, that's what this is all about. And unfortunately, we're going to have to vote no. Having said that, Councilor Jubenville made a great point. He's not going to be here for a long period of time. I think he said his reappointment may be coming up. And if he can prove himself while he's on the parole board, because it looks like he has the votes, then the next time he comes before us will be a different situation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We may begin the roll call.
Counselor Hurley?
Yes.
Counselor Ferrara?
Yes.
Counselor Janine?
No.
Counselor Ianella?
No.
Counselor Tapp? Yes. Counselor Kennedy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd also like to point out that the two seats that were filled were both Western Massachusetts people. So I would hope that if there's another vacancy, that there be consideration given to somebody from Western Mass.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for making that point. We have some new nominations today. Erica Colombo has been nominated to the position of Clerk Magistrate of the Malden District Court. Counselor Kennedy.
11 o'clock next Wednesday, please.
Okay. All right.
What date is that?
That would be the
29.
29th, 11 a.m. We have Mary Beth Ogilevich, who's been nominated to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court, and that is in your jurisdiction, Counselor Hurley.
She, by the way, has a social work background. In any event, I have not had a chance to talk to her, but I believe we'd be going into July because there's 2 on for next week. So I will get back to Valerie probably, hopefully later today, and if not later today, certainly by tomorrow.
Okay, very good.
Excuse me.
Christopher Henry, one more. We have, not yet. She's going to speak to the nominee.
I'm going to schedule it after I talk to the nominee.
Okay,
We've
so
got 3 today. It's going to be very hard. We don't know when you're going to do it.
we're going to share this
Say
information
this, all right?
as soon as she's able to speak to the nominee.
Speech a million times about not having 3 in one day. I did not intend to do that. The only reason and not waiting 2 weeks. The only reason I did Janine today was because she has had a long-standing intent to go to Europe next week. So as I understand it, Counselor Kennedy now has 2 on next week. And I don't intend to put it on for 4th of July week. So it will be probably the week after that. So that's more than enough time for you to have waffles.
Okay, so Christopher Henry has been nominated to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court. Counselor Devaney, this is in your jurisdiction.
We have one July 6th, right? And we have how many the 13th?
There is one at 11 a.m.
One of the 13th. So I'll say July 20th
July 20th.
at 1 o'clock.
Very good. Thank you. It's a full agenda today. Appreciate your.
I asked you for a point of information. I want something to add. It has nothing to do with what we've done.
I'll take
okay?
that.
No, I'm going to read it because it's going to be in the record in our council chamber. This is a letter that all the council got, and I think it should be on the record. And this happened in reply. This is the first time in my 23 years I've ever got a letter from the council, someone making a complaint about one of the members, and I think it should be addressed.
Objection to
I
that.
testified before council on Wednesday, June 15th, in opposition to Representative Kalkosa's nomination. I introduced myself as a volunteer with Parole Watch, and in that capacity had observed many lifer hearings and wanted to share my observations about the kind of expertise essential to the task of the parole board. I was surprised to be interrupted shortly after the beginning to be told, "You're not telling us things we don't know." You allowed me to finish and then again said, "You're not telling us anything we don't know." When we ask people to testify for or against, we're asking for people with direct knowledge of something. Now, you do have direct knowledge of the parole board and the hearings, but so do we. We know more than you do. This is from the chair. Quote. Are you suggesting that citizens who have devoted time and energy to a cause, in this case, the parole board, which you in particular have said you care deeply about, should not care that thoughts and observations regarding decisions that will profoundly affect that cause? Fundamental to the democratic process is an engaged citizenry. Telling citizens that you know more about issues than they do, and thus their input is not welcome, is not the attitude one expects from public servants. Maybe this was not your intention, but that was the message I heard. One last note. In the middle of being questioned by Councilor Devaney, there was significant back and forth among the councilors about the length of time a councilor was permitted to speak, as well as interruptions and accusations of lying. As a member of the public testifying at a public hearing, I felt this put me in an extremely uncomfortable position. This is on the record. 23 years, we've never had a complaint. This is embarrassing. It was terrible the way this person who's gone to hundreds of parole board hearings was told that we know more than she does and cut her off and so forth. But this is going to be on the record, this letter, and I'll give you a copy of it too. So thank you very much, because we don't accept this behavior. For anyone coming in, we show respect.
And Counselor Duff, I believe that you have 15 minutes.
I do, and I don't need 15 minutes, but thank you for that. You've got, besides the fact you've got a terrific resume and you're very well qualified, there's a couple of things that I think are, but one, you work with John Slattery. He's from my hometown, known him my whole life. It's also, to many of us, a hero for what he did and the way he changed the way we live forever. Would. And we'll, go down in history for that forever. Also, I went to Trinity in Washington, and I think we played Hood. I was an athlete. Yeah, I was like Hood, Fredericksburg. I'm sure we may have, but anyway, it's a good school. It was a good school. You're the type of person who wants to do this work, and I do think, I can't remember your name, the attorney, he spoke so eloquently about sometimes, even though you're a prosecutor, Judge Hurley said it earlier in our hearing, you can't judge a book by its cover all the time. And you really have to do it. And when we, and myself included, have been guilty of knee-jerk reactions and saying things and doing things sometimes, but you have to really peel the layers away. You have some of that very clearly revealed to us in your CV, but your actions have really spoken very loudly about who you are as a person. I'm really not going to ask you questions because frankly, I already know the answers. And I don't believe in wasting time in this chamber just to grandstand and hear myself talk. I'm Irish and Italian. We all know I can. So on that, I have no further questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Powell.
Thank you. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
A lot of my questions have been asked and answered, but there's a couple things I'd like to hear from you about. One is, it's been talked about quite a bit already, is the prosecutorial experience and how it would tinge your work as a judge. So there's a lot of talk and training and lip service to implicit bias these days, and it's typically in the context of race, but as a prosecutor, you develop implicit bias as well. So I'm wondering if you could speak to kind of your philosophical approach to addressing the biases that as a human being you come with.
I would just like to say, I think that the jury instructions that we now read at the beginning and the end of every trial has been wonderful. I think people worked really hard on that, and I think it's super helpful to remind everyone in the room, including the jurors, that we all need to take a step back and kind of take a look at things. I can tell you that I always strive to be fair. I always strive to look at, I heard another nominee, I was watching these hearings, talk about when she first started, she just looked at the facts and the record and never even really looked up at the defendant. And I feel like in the beginning I was guilty of that as well, but it's not a defendant, it's a human being. And you need to look at all of the factors. I mean, I understand I come from a prosecutor background. My job is to ensure public safety and keep victims and witnesses safe. But on the other side of the V, as Attorney Smith said, there's a whole another set of circumstances. And I've always tried really hard to make sure that I know everything that I can possibly know before resolving a case or offering a sentencing recommendation. And I can just tell you that I will continue to check myself, continue to learn, and always strive to be fair and consistent across the board, no matter what I do.
So let's talk specifics then around mitigating factors that would inform your decisions, particularly around sentencing, but any of your decisions.
Certainly. I have always been a prosecutor who has welcomed aid sentencing recommendations, or I know CPCS has a social worker on staff who will do a sentencing memorandum that I always read before I offer any kind of a sentencing recommendation. I think it's really important because, again, I have my perspective as the Commonwealth trying to ensure public safety, but I also have always taken into account any information that the defendant, Smith can vouch for this, that the defendant presents that might be mitigated.
So what would be examples of specific mitigating factors that you consider important?
Certainly substance abuse issues, certainly mental health issues.
And how would that inform? So, I mean, is incarceration, when is incarceration a good solution for someone dealing with substance abuse disorder?
In district court, I think that should be a last resort. I think that substance abuse, I have had personal friends who have struggled with substance abuse. It's a long journey.
Yeah.
There's a lot of slip ups. I understand that.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to addiction, I think that rehabilitation is always the focus. Jail is the last resort. I will say one time in Greenfield District Court, as I was walking to my car, a defendant stopped me and thanked me for sending him to jail because it was the best thing that could have happened for him because he was able to clear his head, stop the substances, and start to make a change in his life. And then, his girlfriend, who was the victim, came up and said, he's absolutely right. Thank you for doing it. So it's rare. I'm not saying that that's always what you should do, but sometimes as a last resort is necessary.
I don't discount that story. I've heard people say that. At the same time, I think it speaks to the deficiencies in the preventative services and doesn't actually speak to the efficacy of our houses of correction, which are well documented to be under-resourced in terms of mental health, right? So, so the other thing we heard brought up today are racial disparities in our criminal system, especially around sentencing, which don't really exist at the district court level, the sentencing disparities. But from your perspective, what are some of the drivers of those disparities, whether they're within the control of the judge.
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. I mean, there's so many factors that go into
So
it.
you've worked with a lobbyist, right, in your earlier life?
I did.
So you think about policy, and you're a lawyer, and you think about policy and legislation. What policy recommendations would you make if you were in a position to try to address the racial disparities in the system?
I think we need to start really young. I think we need to provide access to kids, to educate them, teach them, and stop the, prison pipeline and try to get people into different, to learn, keep them educated, keep them in school, keep access to resources. I think that's where we have to start. And hopefully things like that will filter out some of that in the criminal justice system.
What about once they've landed in the system and it's too late to provide those early resources? So the kids who are in our foster system or are in group homes, they build up juvenile records for basically trying to engage in self-preservation, running away from group homes that we don't adequately resource to protect these kids. How does that play out in the district court? How do you consider someone's past record?
Sure. Well, a record is certainly indicative of past behavior, but I don't think it's indicative of the human being in general. And we're very fortunate in Western Mass, our district attorney has just started a young adult court, which is for people 18 to 24.
Is that different than the emerging adult?
I think it's the same thing. Yes, there's 4 of them in the state. There's 4 of them in the country. We are now the 4th one.
Right.
But instead of individuals 18 to 24, because as we know, there's been studies that brain development isn't complete until 25. On paper, they may be someone who looks like they should be indicted and sent to Superior Court where you're facing minimum mandatories, et cetera. But instead, it's a district court case. They plead guilty, and then they're on probation for 12 to 18 months, and then intensive services. So they're helping with GED, college courses, behavioral modification, counseling, drug addiction, mental health addiction. We have the ROCA program. It's a local program that helps individuals with this as well. So I want to see more things like that and feed people into things like that as opposed to jail. Because people get out of jail. I mean, sure, maybe sometimes they come out a better person and they don't ever come back before us. But I think as a general rule, that's not the case. So if we can get to the core issues.
As a general rule, people don't come out better? Is that it?
Probably not.
Okay.
And do I think it's gonna keep them from coming back before the court? Sometimes maybe, but probably not. So address the issues so they don't.
Do you think that initial charging phase is a place where racial disparities originate?
I would have to say yes, but it's hard to say. I mean, it's hard.
So we heard earlier, and you've worked in a prosecutor's office, and I interned in a prosecutor's office, so I have nowhere near the expertise as you, but I've heard over and over from others that there are sometimes, as this morning, overzealous prosecution, perhaps someone trying to prove themselves in their career, and that's human behavior, I understand. As a judge, are you gonna check that? It's not everyone, and it's usually young ADAs, right? So as a judge, are you gonna check that? Is that a role for the judge to talk to the prosecutors? Not in the open courtroom, but it's not.
I mean, as a judge, you're there to call balls and strikes. You can't really come down on one side or the other. So I don't think I can manipulate the prosecution side on that, but I can certainly be cognizant of it. And if there's anything that can be done to address it, I would, but you have
Because it would be a matter of injustice, really. I mean, right? And someone has to address it, and you'd be on the bench for life, right?
That's not my role, though, as a judge.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Hey, just as an aside, right? When I was on the bench, she's right. Okay, you can't come down on somebody.
Thank you.
But the ones, the ADAs who get it, all right, can usually look them in the eye and say, don't you think this deserves some reconsideration as far as the disposition? Or do you really think that this person deserves to have a guilty on their record? There are ways and there are ways. So, just a hint. One other hint is, make sure you have a robe before you take the job. Mom and Dad bought me a robe, even though Hampden County Bar Association does buy robes for the judges. But it came in handy when a new judge that I was mentoring came in the first day and was without a robe. Her name is now in the appeals court, without further mention. So I don't really have any questions. We've talked innumerable times. You were a great candidate. I will tell you that after you were nominated, I ran into one of the JNC members who happened to do your due diligence, and he was shocked at the number of defense attorneys that he contacted who said that you were great. And by great, I mean fair and had good judgment. It's been a pleasure working with you. The vote will be probably next week. And then you have to choose when you're gonna get sworn in and when you're gonna start. So the DA also, I didn't get to mention it, but the district attorney wrote a nice letter on your behalf, even though you only gave him 20 bucks to his campaign. It's true. He gave, what is it, Blue Who or whatever, 200 bucks?
Yes, yeah, blue.
Record, you gave me nothing, which is all I ever wanted. So, good luck to you. I think you'll do a great job. Keep me posted on when you're gonna get sworn in and all that good stuff. Without further ado, this hearing is now closed.